The taxi stopped at the curb like it was dropping off a burden the world didn't want to carry anymore. Michael jumped out first, too fast, too rehearsed, and opened the door with the kind of urgency people use when they're trying to outrun guilt. Then my mother-in-law, Elizabeth, stepped down into the rain, except stepped is too strong a word. She slid her feet forward like the ground was unstable, like every movement cost her a piece of breath she didn't have. 6 months ago, she'd still carried herself like a woman made of iron. Straight spine, sharp eyes, voice that could quiet a room. Now she looked like someone had taken a strong life and wrung it out, leaving only the outline. Her cheeks had caved in. Her wrists were too thin for the sleeves. Her eyes were set deep, not dramatic, just tired in a way that told me she'd been bargaining with pain for a long time and losing. I grabbed the old suitcase Michael handed me. It was lighter than it should have been, and when I pulled it close I smelled the sting of antiseptic and pills, the kind of smell that crawls into curtains and never really leaves. Michael didn't meet my eyes. That was the first crack in the picture. The second was how he kept glancing down the street like somebody might be watching. "Get Mom settled," he said, voice clipped. "I need to talk to you. Now." The words landed wrong. Not because of what they said, but because of how quickly he said them, like he had the line memorized and he needed to get through it before courage ran out. I guided Elizabeth into the downstairs guest room I'd cleaned the day before. Fresh sheets, warm lamp, chair by the bed, a little tray for water and tissues, like care could be organized, like love could be made tidy. She sat on the edge of the bed, lungs pulling air in with a harsh wheeze that sounded like an old machine struggling to start. Her hand found mine. The skin was rough, calloused, cold. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. She just looked at me with a strange expression that unsettled me, because it wasn't fear. It was pity. It was resignation. As if she'd already read the ending, and I was still flipping pages. When I squeezed her fingers and whispered, "You're home now." "I'm here," she barely nodded. "Yes," she rasped, and then her eyes followed me out like she wanted to say more but didn't know how to say it without shattering something. In the living room, Michael stood by the door in his coat, tie perfect, suitcase fully packed like he'd prepared for this moment long before the taxi pulled up. He placed his hands on my shoulders the way people do when they're trying to make their words feel like comfort. "Sophia," he said in that deep, serious voice that always used to convince my heart to relax, "I got the board's decision this afternoon. They're sending me to Germany. 1 year. Big project. It's my only chance to become regional director." My brain didn't accept it at first. I stared at the suitcase like it was the real speaker in the room. "A year," my voice broke. "Michael, your mom just arrived, she's sick. You're leaving now?" He sighed, carefully. "That's the only way I can describe it." Even the sigh felt managed. "I don't want to," he said, and he actually made his eyes glossy like grief was a button he could press. "But look at her. Treatment costs are insane. Radiation, medications, we can't do this on your salary. This trip is for her, for this house, for us." And there it was, the net. The moral net that wraps around a good person's throat. If you protest, you're selfish. If you question, you're ungrateful. If you hesitate, you're the one refusing the future. He slid a debit card into my palm like he was handing me responsibility in plastic form. "The pin is our anniversary," he said. "My salary will be deposited monthly. Use it for Mom. I'll send extra when I can. I need you to be strong. Please." I should have asked harder questions. I should have demanded details. I should have looked at how his cologne didn't smell like work anymore, how it smelled like something expensive and distant, like a man already living a different life. But I did what women like me are trained to do when someone says family in a serious voice. I nodded. He hugged me quickly. Quick enough that it wasn't intimacy. It was an exit. Suitcase wheels rolled across the tile. A taxi door shut. Rain hit harder. Then the engine faded, and the house became quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the walls were holding their breath. When I went back to Elizabeth's room, she didn't ask where her son went. She didn't panic. She didn't beg. She just let out a sigh so thin it barely existed. "He's gone, daughter," she whispered. I stepped closer. smoothing the blanket up to her chest like I could cover the fear too. "He want to earn money for your treatment," I said gently.
Don't worry, Mom.
"I'm here." Elizabeth turned her face toward me, and something in her eyes changed. No longer foggy, no longer distant. It was compassion so deep it made my stomach twist. "You poor thing," she breathed. "He's gone. Consider him gone for good." I tried to smile it off, tried to interpret it as a mother's sadness, a sick woman's dramatic grief. I didn't understand that she wasn't talking about geography. She was talking about character. She was telling me, without accusing, that her son had already left the version of himself that once resembled a human being. The months that followed didn't feel like life. They felt like a loop. Office, hospital, kitchen, medicine, laundry, bills, coughs. Elizabeth declined faster than the doctors predicted. Nights were the worst. Her coughing would seize her body, and I'd sit beside her like a guard, rubbing her back, timing her breaths, praying for pauses. Mornings were a blur of diaper changes, pureed meals, wiping vomit, coaxing water, and then racing to work with my hair half done and my soul exhausted. I got reprimanded twice for lateness and lack of focus. "Your performance is slipping," my boss warned, and I wanted to laugh because slipping implied I still had footing. I felt like I was drowning in a house that smelled like pills and loneliness. Then came the money. The card Michael left me? It carried about $500 a month. That wasn't a paycheck. That was a joke disguised as duty. When I confronted him during video calls, he sighed dramatically and said part of his salary was withheld for insurance and some international payroll processing. Every call he looked well-fed, hair-styled, skin rosy, sitting in clean, quiet places like coffee shops that didn't match the story of his freezing Germany hardships. I'd stare at his face on the screen while Elizabeth coughed in the next room, while my own eyes burned from no sleep, and I'd swallow my anger because I was still trying to be the wife who held things together. I told myself, just get through this.
Just don't break the family.
Just be good. The truth arrived quietly, the way betrayal always does, like a door you didn't lock because you never imagined someone you loved would walk in carrying a weapon. One night I searched for Elizabeth's old medical documents and remembered Michael had scanned some files on his old laptop. He'd shoved it into a closet because it was too slow. I plugged it in. The family folders loaded. I found the medical records. Then I noticed something. His Google account was still logged in. A small notification blinked in the corner. Google Photos synced 12 new photos. I clicked without thinking because part of me still missed my husband, still wanted to see something normal, something that would make this suffering feel like it had a purpose. The first image was ocean, deep blue sea, and bright sky. The next was a seafood platter with a lobster the size of a small animal and a glass of sparkling wine. The location tag hit me like a slap, a 5-star resort in Miami. My hand started to shake. I scrolled. A woman in a bright bikini, lounging like her only job was pleasure. Curled light brown hair. I recognized it instantly. Natalie, Michael's little sister from marketing. Next photo, Michael shirtless, sunglasses, grin wide and shameless, infinity pool behind him, the silhouette of Natalie in the water. No Germany. No work. No sacrifice. Just sun, luxury, and a life funded by the sweat and exhaustion he'd left behind in our home. I shut the laptop, so hard the snap echoed through the house. The pain didn't come as tears at first. It came as nausea, like my body rejected the reality my mind was forced to accept. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had cleaned Elizabeth's blood, her saliva, her sickness, and I felt humiliation so hot it almost felt like fever. I wasn't just betrayed. I'd been used. My loyalty had been turned into labor. My love had been turned into an unpaid job, supporting his freedom. That night a storm rolled in, the kind that rattles windows and makes the world feel like it's tearing itself apart. Elizabeth's breathing worsened. She refused a ventilator. "I want to die at home," she whispered, voice thin like paper. Not in a cold room tied to tubes. I sat beside her, wiping sweat from her forehead with a warm cloth, listening to thunder shake the roof. Then, suddenly, she opened her eyes with a sharpness that startled me. like the last of her strength had been saved for one final purpose. She searched for me with bony fingers and gripped my hand with surprising force. Her nails dug into my skin. She leaned close, breath smelling of goodbye. "Sophia," she rasped, "Michael is a scoundrel. I know everything. I know where he is." My throat tightened. So she knew.
The whole time.
She hadn't been blind. She'd been silent because some pains are too big to speak. Tears pooled in the wrinkles near her eyes. "Good daughter," she whispered. "Listen to me. After my funeral, go back to my hometown alone. Alone. Go to the old kitchen. Dig under the big ceramic crock in the corner, the one we used for pickles. I hid something there. It's for you." Thunder swallowed the last word. Her grip loosened. And then, like a candle going out, she was gone.
Just like that.
Silence filled the room. So complete it felt violent. I called Michael. No answer. Again. No answer. The fifth time, he responded with a text. "In an important meeting with German partners. Cannot talk. How is Mom?" I stared at the words, and a bitter laugh escaped me through tears. A meeting at 3 in the morning Chicago time? Or a meeting in a hotel bed in Miami? I typed with hands trembling. "Mom passed away. Come home." The message showed as read instantly. No reply. Michael didn't come back. He sent excuses. Project critical, penalty clauses, promises he'd make it up later. At the funeral, he appeared on video call in a black suit, face twisted in dramatic grief. Relatives praised his good heart. People told me to be strong for him. I stood there with my head bowed, thanked them with a polite smile, and felt contempt so cold it steadied me. My tears had dried out months ago in the middle of the night when I was alone with his mother's suffering. After cremation, I took the urn and Elizabeth's photograph and boarded a bus toward her hometown. Michael messaged that I should place her ashes in a city columbarium for convenience. I refused without explanation. I knew Elizabeth didn't want convenience. She wanted truth delivered where it had been hidden. The rural house sat at the end of a dirt road. Weeds climbing like time had tried to swallow it. The gate creaked open like a warning. Inside smelled of dampness and old wood. I placed the urn on the mantel, lit a candle, and sat on the floor beneath her portrait through the night, listening to crickets and wind slip through cracks. I wasn't afraid. That's what shocked me. In the presence of her ashes, in a lonely, broken house, I felt safer than I ever had in my modern home built on lies. At dawn, I found a shovel and walked to the old detached kitchen. Cobwebs hung like curtains. In the corner sat the ceramic crock, dusty and heavy. I pushed it aside. Packed dirt stared up at me like an unopened grave. I dug. The first inches were stubborn. Deeper down, the soil softened. Then my shovel struck metal. My breath stopped. I cleared dirt with my hands until I found a rusty tin wrapped in plastic. I carried it outside into the pale morning light and pried it open. Inside, a passbook from a community bank and a yellowed envelope. No jewelry. No gold. But the number in the passbook made my vision blur. $150,000. I counted the zeros again and again, like reality might change if I blinked. Then I remembered 5 years ago, the highway project. Eminent domain. Compensation. Michael had asked about it once, curious like a hawk circling a field. Elizabeth had said it was a few thousand. She'd lied. Not to be greedy.
To protect something.
My hands shook as I opened the envelope. First came an adoption certificate, official seal faded but real. Elizabeth Thompson and her late husband were the adoptive parents. Adopted child, Michael Thompson. Reason, infant abandoned at the town clinic. The air left my lungs. Michael wasn't her biological son. He was a child she'd chosen. A gift she'd taken in. A life she'd poured herself into. Then I unfolded her letter, written in purple ink, shaky but firm in meaning. She described finding him as a newborn, umbilical cord still attached, crying from hunger and cold. She wrote of love, of hope, of raising him as her own, of burying the truth so he wouldn't feel the stigma of abandonment. And then the line that broke me. She wrote that as he grew older, he became distant, calculating, selfish. She still loved him, but she no longer trusted him. She left the money to me.
To me, the daughter-in-law.
If he treats you well, give him a part, her words implied. But if he behaves like a miserable wretch, it is all yours. Consider it compensation for the youth you have wasted. I pressed the paper in my chest and cried, not because money saved me, but because someone saw me. Someone knew. Someone had watched my suffering and left. That rope didn't immediately become revenge. It became strategy. When Michael texted me a photo of a beach and wrote, "Partners invited me to a resort in Germany," I zoomed in and saw Natalie reflected in a glass table. Miami again. He thought I was stupid. He thought my world ended at the kitchen sink. He didn't realize pain teaches women to think like survivors. I replied with careful calm, "I'm in your mom's town dealing with her affairs." While cleaning, I found a metal box under the kitchen floor. It contains documents, deeds, and something important about your origin. It looks like a large inheritance. The county office says only the son can sign. You should come back. Within minutes, his phone call lit up my screen like a greedy animal smelling meat. "What box?" he demanded, excitement cracking through his voice. "What inheritance? Mom had no money." I kept my voice tired, neutral. "I don't know. But the clerk says it's urgent." He swallowed the bait, hook and all. 2 days later, he appeared at my door with a sun-kissed tan and designer luggage, playing exhausted like an actor who forgot his role. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't go near the urn. He didn't whisper, "I'm sorry." His first words were, "Where's the box? Show me now." I watched him with a stillness I didn't recognize in myself. "Before inheritance," I said quietly, sliding a stapled stack across the table, "there are bills. Hospital costs, medications, funeral expenses, $22,000. I drained my savings," I told him, eyes locked on his face. "I borrowed from friends. You're her son. You pay, then we talk." He exploded, face red. "Are you insane? How can it be that much?" And in his outrage, his mask slipped. His good son performance died right there in my living room, and all that remained was a man furious that someone dared present him with accountability. I let him argue, because the more a liar talks, the clearer he becomes. Finally, when he demanded the real documents, I said, "They're in her hometown. If you want them, come." He grumbled, but agreed. He would have walked into fire if he believed money waited on the other side. In the old house, dust floating in sunlight, I opened a small safe and placed the adoption certificate and Elizabeth's letter on the table. The moment he read adoptive, his hands began to tremble. His face drained pale. "This is fake," he shouted, crushing the paper like anger could undo ink. "She spoiled me. I'm her son." I leaned forward and spoke slowly. "She loved you more than biology. That's why she never told you. But tell me, how did you repay her? You abandoned her. You lied. You let your wife wipe her blood while you laughed beside a pool." His mouth opened, but no defense came. Some truths don't leave room for excuses. Then I placed divorce papers in front of him, already signed by me. "Here's your choice," I said. "You sign. I keep the house in her town and assume all $22,000 in debt. You walk away free. No alimony. No shared claims. No ties." His eyes flickered like a calculator. He didn't grieve. He didn't hesitate for love. He hesitated only for profit and loss. "You'll take the debt?" he asked, voice suddenly gentle. "You'll never come after me?" I nodded. "I want peace. I want a place to honor her. I want you out of my life." He signed quickly, relieved, even smug, like he'd escaped a trap. He tossed the pen down. "Enjoy your godforsaken hole," he said, already emotionally boarding his next flight to pleasure. That's when I handed him my last gift, a stack of printed bank statements, credit card charges, transaction records, Miami hotels, designer purchases, ATM withdrawals near casinos. "You spent over $30,000, I said evenly, "on your mistress and gambling while your mother died. And you just signed an agreement stating there are no shared debts and personal debts remain personal. His smile cracked, then broke completely. We were married, he barked. You're responsible too. I pointed to the clause. He reread it, eyes widening as he realized his greed had made him careless. He had signed away the only chance he had to pull me down with him. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. The trap he'd built for others snapped shut around his own ankles. He stumbled out, rage muted by panic. I closed the door and slid down against it, exhausted, not victorious. Because even when you win against a monster, you still have to live with the memory of how close you once slept to its teeth.
I didn't feel joy.
I felt grief, for Elizabeth, for myself, for the years I'd poured into a man who treated love like a resource to mine. Days later, Natalie contacted me, voice shaky, asking to meet. In a quiet coffee shop, she looked nothing like the carefree woman in the bikini photos. She was pale, eyes bruised by sleeplessness, hands trembling like she'd realized too late what kind of fire she'd warmed herself beside. She confessed, no pregnancy. It was a lie to pressure Michael. But now he was drowning in debt and threatening her. Then she said the words that turned my blood cold. He's planning to destroy you. He's talking to a lawyer about suing you, saying you abused his mother. He's faking messages, editing photos. Natalie offered proof, recordings, files, an encrypted drive, in exchange for money to disappear. I didn't trust her, but I trusted one thing. Desperate people tell the truth when fear is bigger than loyalty. I paid, took the drive, and listened to Michael's voice in recorded calls. Cruel, smug, careless. My wife is an idiot, he said. We'll scare her. Prepare the lawsuit. Add the doctored photos. I sat in silence, not because I was shocked, because deep down Elizabeth had already warned me, but because hearing it out loud felt like being forced to watch a wound open again. The drive also revealed something worse. Gambling spreadsheets, shady transfers, even evidence of embezzlement through a shell company. Michael wasn't just a bad husband. He was a criminal spiraling toward disaster, and he wanted to drag me with him because he needed someone to blame when the walls collapsed. I hired a lawyer. I documented everything. I photographed the forged will he had prepared, dated while Elizabeth was in a coma, signature obviously fake. I prepared my defense like armor because I finally understood. Kindness without boundaries is not love. It's permission. When Michael arrived later with a slippery-looking lawyer and tried to threaten me, social media smear, job sabotage, accusations, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I let him talk while my recorder captured every word. Then I placed the evidence in front of them like a judge placing a verdict on a table. Forged will, medical proof, bank statements, recordings, and the drive's contents. The lawyer's face strained. He gathered his briefcase and stood so fast his chair scraped. This is felony territory, he stammered. I can't be involved. He fled, leaving Michael alone with the consequences of his own life. Michael's voice turned small. What are you going to do? He whispered. Send me to prison? I stared at him and felt nothing like love, nothing like hate, just emptiness where trust used to live. You have two options, I said. Disappear forever and never speak my name again, or I send everything to the police today. He backed toward the door like an animal sensing a trap. Before he left, I gave him one last truth to break the fantasy he'd destroyed everything for. Natalie was never pregnant. She lied. And she sold you out. He froze, shock turning his face into something childlike and terrified. Then he stumbled outside, and I closed the door, separating my life from his collapse. Not long after, Elizabeth's secret attorney contacted me. Proof that her love had been planning for my protection long before the storm arrived. A second will. A final shield. A small apartment she owned, left to me if Michael proved himself unworthy. Elizabeth had written her own justice. Not revenge, but safety. The kind of safety a good woman tries to give another good woman when she knows the world is full of wolves wearing wedding rings. In the end, Michael didn't disappear quietly. People like him rarely do. Cornered greed turns into violence. One night, with rain tapping the windows like old memories returning, he forced his way in with a knife. eyes wild, voice cracked, demanding money that was never his. But I had already called the police. I had already installed a plan the way survivors do, quietly, thoroughly, without drama. When he lunged, pepper spray hit his face, and the next sound was officers bursting in, shouting commands, cuffs clicking shut like fate closing a book. He was sentenced for fraud, forgery, financial crimes, the kind of end that looks sudden to outsiders, but is actually the final step in a long walk of choices. I never saw him again. And what did I do with what Elizabeth left me? I didn't buy a flashy car. I didn't throw a party to prove I won. I did something simpler, something that felt like healing. I opened a small bookstore cafe and named it Elizabeth's Legacy. I filled shelves with stories because stories are how people survive what should have broken them. I served coffee because warmth matters when you've lived too long in cold rooms. Some afternoons I'd catch myself staring at the door, not waiting for Michael, but wondering if I could ever trust again. Then one day someone walked in, a kind face, a calm smile, not trying to impress anyone, just present. And for the first time in a long time, my body didn't tense. My chest didn't tighten. I smiled back, small and real, because that's how new beginnings actually arrive. Not as fireworks, but as quiet light after a long storm.